So 5:03, we'll open the meeting, and I see Tom here. Pat, has Tom gone through have you gone through the process?
So technically, we are at full capacity, but I know Tom had reached out his interest in joining, so public meeting.
But after today, we're not gonna be at full capacity.
No, so after today, if you stepping down, we would not
Right.
be at full capacity, so,
We'll be one short.
yes.
So then, Tom, I'm assuming the select board does not have a roster of applicants, or do they?
Someone else has reached out with interest. I believe they may have submitted something as well, but I know we talked about
And we have Kevin's position in
Kevin
March.
also is leaving at the end of April, or?
I'll do March or April. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's just say March, and if no one's here, you need me for
Yeah.
a quorum. But except the April one, just make it the end of March. I'll be in St. Martin in April, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not gonna get zoomed
How
in.
many times are you gonna tell us that? You said St. Martin now 4 times, and we've been in the
Really
meeting.
looking forward to it.
Well, I'll let you know when I buy that property there.
But yeah, so if Tom's interested, and I think, like I said, someone else is also, has reached out about interest, so we would have 2 openings.
But there's no application. Tom, is your application in yet?
No, there is an application, I just got it, you can't edit it, I tried to print, the printer failed, so I have, I'll get it in this week.
Yeah.
All right, so you're good to go, then, decision-wise?
Yeah,
All right,
Yeah.
excellent. Good, good.
if you'll have me, I'll stay, otherwise I'm just
Well,
here for a couple meetings until I'm not selected.
It's good to be in the position that we're actually like,
Yeah, have people in the
have
wings.
people that are
Absolutely.
waiting to come on, so that's good. All right, we have minutes to approve. If someone wants to make a motion to do that.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for January 21st, 2025.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstain, anybody not here?
I'm ashamed.
That was a yes from you?
Sorry.
Yep. Yep, okay, so, is it 501, 401?
501234501.
501?
This was last week, yeah.
Okay. Any order you want to go in, Patrick?
No,
or-
up to you.
No? Okay, so we'll talk about the Spring Business Forum then, where that stands.
I believe earlier this month, the subcommittee met to kind of go over planning, both for speakers, in terms of agenda, layout. Harry and Kevin and Brianna are the reps from the board, and Sarah Katib from Destination Downtown. I believe we have 1 speaker confirmed, and I know Harry could speak to that for business development. Looking to finalize 2 speakers. I think Brianna found somebody that's a CPA. Kind of have to talk to her when she gets back from vacation, but, similar to previous years in terms of having subject matter experts be there to kind of respond, and our release talk about, their area of expertise. Talked about possibly having some sort of interactive, portion of the event, and that was kind of something that was missing from previous events. I know we've done like, kind of like, hey, everybody, talk about, your name, your business, where you're from. I think it was a couple years ago we did that, but look into something that'd probably be, try to get some feedback from people. We've had surveys that have gone out after the fact, but usually haven't got a lot of feedback. So trying to kind of retain people when they're there to, get some information from people, or get some viewpoints from people. Kind of add that to the agenda.
But all the logistics are in place and everything's ready?
Oh, yeah, the country club it's pretty set in stone now, so that's April 3rd, that Thursday, first Thursday in April, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. I don't know if Harry or Kevin have anything to add to that in terms of what we're gonna.
What did we have last time for head count?
We probably had 65, 68 or something like that, people that had actually RSVP'd. We probably had a little over 70 that were there, I would think.
What does the room max out at?
Oh,
Plenty of room.
plenty of room, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Seems to run well every year.
Yeah.
Who's the speaker that you got, Harry?
She's a business coach, strategic planner, Lisa Levesque. She lives in Foxborough and is part of one of the business groups here in Walpole.
Foxborough or Boxborough?
Foxborough.
Good. All right, so I guess that's ready to roll. And you want to go through the department updates, or do we want to go straight to?
Your call. Yeah, I'll do whatever you want.
All right, well, why don't we go to the new chair then? I think it's well known that we are going to be voting in a new chair.
Did we give Beth the opportunity to throw her hat in?
Well, thank you, Janelle. No, thank you.
We could do a hostile nomination for Beth if we want.
No, thank you very much, Janelle.
You're welcome,
Remember
Beth.
that.
Every nomination's a hostile nomination.
I know, it's funny that every nomination, since I think Danelle was a hostile nomination. So just so it's on the record and we're clear, we feel good that Brianna is on board. I know we all feel good, well, I don't want to speak for everybody, I feel good about Brianna as the chair, but I just want to make sure that with her absence today, that everybody feels like she has given the go-ahead and the thumbs up that she wants to take it on. So I think if we feel good about that, and I'll give everybody a chance to say what they think, but if there's no one that opposes Brianna, then I think we're pretty good to take a vote. Pat, you feel good with that as well?
Yeah, no, I do.
Okay.
I mean, if anything happens, we could just
Yeah.
re-vote.
Danelle, what do you
All right.
think about that?
No,
Do you think
I'm
that's
all in
okay?
favor. I think I definitely get the impression she's interested in taking
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
even
if she
in her
wants it, let's,
reply email, so
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with it, and I think she'd be a great person to be a chair.
Yeah, I think she brings a lot. I think that, I think her outlook and her enthusiasm could bring a lot to the committee, and, I think it'd be a good move, so. If no one's opposed to it, and believe me, I've been here for, more than 10 years now, and this has been the sweetest, kindest pumpkin pie committee that we've had, so don't be afraid to speak out if somebody thinks someone else would be good. I know that if Hassenjaeger was in here or something, that we might get some pushback, but I love John, don't get me wrong, those are the fun days, but if no one has anything negative, and I can't imagine they would, then I'll entertain a motion to nominate Brianna as the new chair.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, so should I
now,
say?
does she start next month?
Yes,
Yeah.
next meeting,
I guess so.
next meeting.
Nice, congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations to her on the record, so if she's watching this from wherever she
Yep,
is.
exactly. And
We'll be sure,
congratulations
we'll
to
let her know
Mark.
tomorrow.
We're letting her know, good, I feel good about that. From my point of view, I started out, what's that guy's name? The bald guy, is his first name Chris?
Oh, yeah, Chris Walker.
Chris Walker.
Chris Walker,
Yeah, that's when I first started, so that was a long time ago. And it's been real interesting along the way, but I think it's a good time to move on.
Good luck.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And,
Appreciate your effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
yeah, we've had some ups and downs, but I think that it started to get really fun when we became the party planning committee. But hopefully now Brianna can,
We weren't
party
just the
planning
party
committee.
planning committee.
well, it seemed
No,
like
we
that for a
weren't
little
just
while.
that.
But I think things are progressing in the right direction. I think Brianna and Tom and having Harry on as a full member will bring some much-needed life and relevance to the group. Okay, so having said that, what do we got? We got
Yeah,
department updates.
let's use an opportunity to kind of go over that. So the commercial industrial zoning study, I think I had mentioned this last time. This is when we had met with, it was Gurdeep Kaur from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Her end of the project has been stalled, and most of that has to do with the fact that our supplemental funding that we're hoping to get from its EEA, the Executive of Energy and Environmental Affairs, that funding, for whatever reason, has been delayed. I have no other really good response. We had applied for the grant back in July. Usually you'd find out for that program before September. It's been delayed, so I know a few other communities that have applied for that funding too and are kind of, at a loss, because there's no real reason for why it's
So
been
it's not
delayed.
just Walpole, it's.
No, yeah, usually when they get their funding for each fiscal year, there's probably between 20 and 30 towns that are awarded funding through that program, so, we're, where I kind of bring that back to the, in commercial industrial zoning study is that when we had done the scope of it, there was two options. There was, scope A, which was the expectation that we'd get the additional funding, and it was a much more, in-depth, scope, as well as amount of work that we'd get out of it. And then scope B was the scale down project, which would be based upon the funding from from MAPC. So she doesn't, and I agree, we don't want to go forward with the smaller project until we have a definitive answer one way or the other. So a little bit of a holding pattern until we can get some clarity on what's going on. I've reached out to EA a few times, and it's been kind of, soon, we're gonna find out. The director that runs the program did email, I think, everyone that applied, and basically just apologized and said there's been,
Are they
unexpected delays.
rerouting that money, or are they just trying to plan differently? Or is the
Hon-
project, or has the state said, we're scrapping this?
I don't imagine they will. I mean, it's been a program that, as long as I've been doing this, has always been around, probably at least since, pre-2010. Like, it's a pretty well-established grant program. So, once we get a little more clarity, then that changes, I guess, the amount of work that we'd be able to get out of the program. But that being said, we have the existing conditions survey and study that she's already put together. Lauren and I have looked at it and have, made a few different changes here and there, but the next step, probably in the next few weeks, is get a copy of that to the EDC for your all review of that document. And hopefully from that point, we have some clarity one way or the other of what's happening with the supplemental funding.
Is the town outside of EDC waiting on that,
No,
or anything in particular?
nope, it's just the EDC, so it's,
So no master plan stuff, no town meeting thing, nothing is hoping that this document comes in?
oh, well, I mean, the document is tied to the master plan in the sense that this commercial industrial zoning study was one of the recommendations as part of the economic development portion of the draft master plan. So that was kind of the basis of looking into the project, because that was, one of the key areas was we have a lot of underutilized industrial land, and we have kind of sporadic limited manufacturing property, and is that being used to the, the highest and greatest potential?
But there's no domino effect where we're waiting for this, so the master plan gets up, put on hold or something, nothing like
No,
that? We're
no,
just-
no, no,
okay.
no, nothing like that.
So these are just tweaks that can be made afterwards if
Yeah.
it comes through.
Yeah, I mean, if for whatever reason the project is limited, this would just be, I hate to say it, this would be whatever document was, is the end product from MAPC, that could be the catalyst for a more in-depth study. But ideally, we get the supplemental funding, and this is the more in-depth study. And I guess to tie it back into, if there's anything waiting on this, a part of the reason of my thought process of looking at both this project as well as the the town zoning bylaw review and rewrite is some of the information that we would get from this would hopefully tie into changes to zoning, specific for the town's use table. So certain uses and obviously the, where they're located within the town, expanding on that section of our zoning, modernizing that, as well as anything in terms of, dimensional regulations or use regulations
Right.
that might pertain to certain
That's why I
use.
was asking,
Yeah.
because that has to be a town meeting change, right?
A zoning bylaw update, yeah.
Zoning bylaw. So let's say this gets held out, that means no action could be taken in, like, maybe for another year, if it takes too much longer, correct?
To some extent, so I guess this study would help justify those specific changes as it relates to like certain uses. And it
But it doesn't hold up the changes if someone wants to make them.
doesn't hold the changes if someone wants to make them, but obviously it provides a little bit more, it provides evidence, it provides background to why certain changes would happen. But in terms of the zoning bylaw update, there's a lot of other things that are changing independent of just anything tied to commercial development.
Sure.
So that project is still ongoing. I think we're proposing our first phase of zoning bylaw updates for this May. But having talked through it with town council, that project is probably, we're doing it in phases instead of just bringing forward, hey.
You're not rolling out everything.
Yeah, I
You're
mean,
just-
that would
you're gonna-
be,
yeah, that would be
I
tough.
couldn't do a 200, 300-page update. I'm sure people would
Right.
not be happy with me. So it's probably gonna be at least 3 or 4 different cycles of incremental changes. So if, for whatever reason, if this project, the commercial industrial zoning study gets delayed, we'd push back the changes to like the table of use to the later stage.
So things are still moving, this is just
Yeah,
another
it's,
thing.
it's an unforeseen kind of situation that unfortunately we don't really have any control of, and neither does our consultant, but we don't want to just jump the gun and do the smaller project. We want to get
Yeah,
clarity
I don't
first
blame you.
before.
I'd rather hear the no than
Yeah,
hear that we don't know.
exactly.
Have you seen other grants being held up the same way? Is it becoming a trend, or is it just this in particular?
Nothing like this one, mostly because you do get some communication from the group that's running the grant program, whatever state agency that is, there's a lot more communication, whereas this one, I feel like I've had to email them a bunch of times to try to get like, hey, what's going on? So, no, this one's kind of unique. If there's any type of delay, they'll usually let you know, and it's usually not that significant.
I'm just wondering if it's a transfer from the state. I wonder if it's being funded with federal money and they're worried about the status of that. You never know.
You never know, and truthfully, I don't know where exactly I mean, I know which agency runs the program, but I don't know if the ins and outs of where else it's tied to, if it's
Yeah.
federal or not.
All right.
I don't believe it is, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
All right. And what else do we have?
So on top of that, Lauren and I have kind of continued to look at both the draft master plan as well as just, taking comments from, from discussions here and just discussions in our department and look into the upcoming fiscal year grant cycle through the state's one-stop platform. This is, I think I've talked about this in the past, where usually before, up until, I think pre-COVID, if you wanted to apply for a certain grant, you had to apply for that grant itself and just get it when the program came around. But a few different agencies specific towards housing and commercial and economic development, it's all on one platform. You base an application based upon the project itself, and then the most fitting grant would be assigned to that. There's certain specific questions that are tied to certain specific grant programs that you would need to answer. So you wouldn't just be able to say, hey, we want to do this, but we may need to tie it to a certain grant program. So we looked into that this year, and this is kind of what my brief memo was, just both two different project locations, when thinking about economic development, both downtown, which is always something that we think about, and then the industrial park. Both would involve, a few different programs through the One Stop. Within the downtown, there's a program that offers tax credits for helping to fill vacant storefronts. So thought that was kind of an interesting project, whereas, we can change zoning and try to make, and, obviously we've done a lot, our building department has done a lot to try to make permitting a lot easier, but this is also another, probably more proactive way to try to increase the interest in, in bringing in any new commercial tenants in the downtowns that, if you have a tax credit program, maybe that's another way for a town to try to, fill vacancies. The other program that I thought of for downtown was, it's called the Underutilized Properties Program. This is two different areas you could look into, both pre-development and then actual hard costs for improving a certain building. So it's meant to be kind of if a town were to apply for it, you would go into it with the property owner itself, because it's, the property can't be a municipal building, has to be a privately owned property that has a public benefit, whether that's improving the visual appearance, trying to remove blight, or trying to increase the, obviously I guess the worth of that building, or that increase the tax value of that building. So it was just kind of thinking of a few different locations and, what, like 100 Elm Street is one, the Kendall Building is just an idea I had in my head, and just in terms of it's a massive building, is there something there to try to increase, keeping that as commercial, as something that is, still being utilized for, at a commercial tax rate. So that was the catalyst of just thinking of that grant program, is like, oh, that's a huge piece of land, and
But this doesn't apply to buildings or available space that's not a quote-unquote light, or that has, or could that be under the underutilized?
so, yeah, it's broad in the sense of, I mean, how do you define blight? Everyone
Right.
has a different opinion of that, but I think the goal of it is trying to tie it into, well, what's the public benefit, the public purpose of it? So if it's just somebody that has a building and, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, like the roof is on, the HVAC system's working, structurally, and it's structurally, it's holding up well, there's hard to kind of really make a connection between that program, but I think it's really specific to something that is probably not being kept in the best condition
So
possible.
more like TD's versus Union and West.
Yeah, so that was another building I was thinking of, not to call it out, but that's something
Yeah.
where, as you drive into the downtown, that's a big visual, as you enter Walpole downtown, there's an underutilized, building that's probably
And
not in the
it's
best
not
shape.
ready for prime time. It needs to be
Exactly, and
updated.
that's kind of where, this isn't just, putting on paint, it's trying to make sure the building is in the best condition possible to have a future tenant.
Right,
be able to
whereas
move in.
the newer buildings, they have the space, but it's just that they don't have a tenant, there's nothing wrong with the space.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing,
Yeah.
nothing wrong with the space.
Okay, all right.
So that was,
What if the space had limitations that were not related to the building, like, take Union West, for instance, where, and I'm just throwing this out there, let's say they wanted to put like a higher-end coffee shop or something in there, but parking was an issue. Is there a way to squeeze that in sideways to something like this, or is that kind of out of the scope?
that would be out of the scope for this one,
Okay.
so landscaping as well as parking and just the, the visual appearance from the grounds standpoint, that's not included, it's mostly, it's all geared to really the building,
Got
both
it.
inside
Okay.
and the structural integrity of the building.
That makes sense. And it's only for the central business district, or?
No, it could be town-wide. I think my initial thought was just downtown, just because it's in terms of where's the connect, obviously every commercial business is a public benefit, but, something to tie in both,
Right. And I see a distinction on here for pre-development projects. Could that space down in East Walpole where the clock tower is maybe qualify for something like that if it needed something infrastructure-wise to maybe entice someone to come in there and develop it?
I would have to look into that one a little more, because I think that one is,
It's a unique situation.
it's a unique
but-
situation, because there are plans that exist for that property, and I know the, the previous applicant who had gone through the process of, getting site plan review and getting the special permit, they were no longer able to proceed with the project, but, we've gotten calls on it a bunch. I think they're looking to sell that project, so,
Wasn't there plans pre-COVID?
oh, yeah, so there
Way
was,
before that, right?
yeah, I think,
So they might just have decided, either financially or whatever, that they're out of the game there and they just want to scrap it.
yeah, so the owner that did the plans pre-COVID, she's still the owner, but the person that had got the most recent plans, they were the potential buyer. So it's kind of an awkward situation, whereas
Got it.
they're not the owner, they were the applicant to go through the process, and they have this project, but they don't
They
actually
weren't
own
going
the
to move
building.
forward unless they actually got the property as well, right? They weren't going to ever be a tenant. They were,
That, I think, I really don't know. I think they were intending to buy it, and for whatever reason, I don't know the ins and outs, whether or not they fell through or didn't have the funding, but
Got it.
they,
Okay.
they weren't able to proceed. But that's a good question. I'm not sure if that's something North Town could obviously look into pre-development and get more intensive plans for something like that made up as a way to entice, someone to purchase that building and preserve the clock tower. I could look into that
is
one.
that a requirement?
In terms of the,
Preserve the clock tower? That clock tower, is it historic or
it's definitely historic.
did it get labeled? I
Um,
mean, does it have to stay?
It's, does not have to stay because it's not on the National Registry that I'm aware of. I'm pretty sure it's not on the National Registry. But you'd have to go through a process with the Historical Commission, like a demolition delay process. Usually they do that for any property that's over, a certain age. But as part of the special permit, and as part of the most recent special permit and site plan, there was, it was conditioned essentially that clock tower would be incorporated into the project. The intention to keep that.
Yeah, I think everybody would hate to see it go, but
Yeah,
at what cost? Because that lot has been there
yeah.
since I can remember, so.
I could look into that one too. But yeah, those are two programs for the downtown that I kind of want to just float out there. If anyone had any thoughts, like you said, in terms of looking at the clock tower or any other, the vacant storefront one is interesting. It kind of, it lines up. It makes sense, at least definitely on the face value, but I did speak to the building commissioner, try to get an understanding of like, hey, I walk around, I can look at vacant storefronts, but what do we have? And the number is between 10 or 11 that he found. Some of them were more in pre-development, so they're kind of on the process of being filled. But there's also a requirement that, this needs to be a vacant storefront for at least 6 months or greater. So something that's been closed for a long time. So there are a few locations that definitely are applicable to it, so still interested in pursuing it. But
If I'm reading this right, there are 5 that have not been built yet, but those projects will be going forward, and then there'll be 5 more storefronts.
So 5 are in the process of getting built out, which are vacant, so I guess I would technically.
They're being
exclude-
built now. They're
Yeah.
not pre-development. They're being developed as we speak.
Yeah, and what he meant by that, it might have been someone, there's a tenant in place and they're in the process of doing interior construction, and hopefully they'll.
So is that like the old Bank of America building? Would that be one of them?
I would consider that one of them. It's a storefront.
Probably count a handful
Yeah.
of them off the top of your head.
Yeah, I would consider that one of them because that is the intention. It's a mixed-use building. It's got a
So
public.
how
facing
does that
storefront.
work in process? Because obviously, they're not empty for 6 months, but would that be allowed to be an incentive for someone to get in a tenant quicker than,
Yeah.
I don't, that
Well, as long
that
as
seemed
that
odd
building's
to me.
taken for them to go up,
Yeah.
maybe it is empty for 6 months.
That one's, I was gonna say that one might
Where does the
disqualify
6 months
itself.
start?
So, no, that's a really good question. I would say it would probably have to be at least 6 months from the date you apply.
Okay.
And then if obviously that situation changes, it's almost like it's a floating number, right? And so I guess I would have to kind of read up on that for the program, because the way this works is you apply in June, they award the funding usually, or they let you know in November, and everything doesn't get finalized until you're going into the next calendar year. This program itself is tied solely to FY '26, whereas, some programs have a little bit more flexibility if you need to carry it over. So it would have a tight time frame. Whereas if, hey, we have, the available tax credits starting January 1st, but I have less than a year to try to use that for,
And it cannot be a municipal building, right?
cannot be a municipal building.
So Old Town Hall's off the table.
Well, this is tax credit, so if we wouldn't, tax
Oh,
credit,
this
yeah.
is only tax credit.
So the two different programs, I don't know if
Okay.
you're, the underutilized properties program has to be a privately owned building, cannot be a
Got it.
publicly owned building. The vacant storefront program is, it would be technically a privately owned building, because public doesn't pay
Right, they
tax on
won't pay
buildings,
taxes,
yeah.
yeah, okay,
So-
all right.
Is that 50 per town, or
Yeah,
it's a stupid question?
no, yeah, the 50,000 tax credits would be per
So the
town.
town would just say, if 6 came forward, you'd figure out a way to split the 50.
Yeah,
right?
and a lot of the back end with it in terms of how it gets applied is dealt with kind of the state. So the town almost acts as like the middleman, really, in this situation.
You're distributing the,
Yeah, in terms of advertising the program and trying to, bring in an applicable, I guess, business, you'd be working with the state agency that runs the program to kind of flesh out all the paperwork end of it. Because I'm sure there's a lot of other information that goes in with that than just
got it.
choosing somebody.
But
I'm
the owner,
assuming
go ahead, no, you go. You
Yeah, I'm assuming it's one time, or is it per year?
So
Be
That,
nice to have it per year, but I can't see the state.
yeah, I think
Going
there's a
through that.
cap here, there's a cap on it. It's not indefinite, and I think it's longer than a year. Unfortunately, I don't remember on the top of
Right.
my head the
So
details.
if only one applicant comes through, and get approved, do they get the whole 50?
That, I don't know. I would assume if we're applying for something like this, and if the state's gonna take into consideration different applications, we would probably wanna show that we have a significant need for it, which is kinda why I bring back, if we only have 6 I can think of, that is on the smaller side, compared to other communities that may have many more vacancies.
Sure.
You know, it's unfortunate, because I think the program is specifically tied to town centers. Whereas if you could open up town-wide, then that certainly kind of changes things, because there's probably a lot more vacancies town-wide, obviously, than just focused on the downtown. But it's just something to think about, because I mean, like, if we do it and there's only 2 vacancies, it's really not, it doesn't really make sense for that program, because we could apply, but I doubt the state would grant you the program if you only have like a handful of vacancies.
Yeah, because they don't have 300 of these available.
Yeah, they can't give them out to every town.
X amount, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other program that, this has been a project that I know has been talked about in various, I think Sewer and Water's probably mentioned it, and I know they've done a feasibility study, but we looked at the industrial park, and one of the big things that always comes up, that at least since I've been here, that I've heard about, is just obviously not having it connected to town sewer limits the potential for the growth of that industrial park. And so the number is fairly significant. I think it was around 3.2 million just to connect the industrial park. The total number in terms of bringing the sewer line down Main Street is, I think, over 5 million. But I think it's a project that if that park is ever gonna grow, and that's certainly a piece of industrial zone land in Walpole that's usable, that maybe isn't being utilized to its highest potential. And so thinking of a project that can both make that area more attractive, but then also thinking of the long-term growth of the town and in the sewer system, and and not to jump topics here, but I'm also just thinking of, all right, well, what happens if the prison property, is that something that also could utilize sewer hypothetically one day?
So you're saying it's approximately 3.2 to the industrial park, but 5 if they go to the town line?
Not to the town line. I think it was, is a portion of it if you bring it up Main Street, as opposed to, I think where they're going through is one of the side streets.
Like one of those neighborhoods?
Yeah,
Huntington Ave, I think.
yeah.
Isn't it already up in that area?
Not at the industrial
Where
park.
does sewer end right now up in that area?
I believe within those neighborhoods, off the top of my head.
Isn't
I
it
can
in the
give-
neighborhood that runs behind the new ball fields? Isn't that the closest connection?
Yeah, no, that's on the other side, obviously, yeah,
But that's the
they
closest connection to that end of 1A,
to that end, but not to the industrial
but
park.
not to the
Was
industrial.
it on South Street? Like Rich Shields building? The Tufts Medical Center, is that on sewer?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think so.
Isn't that sewer down there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the back door into that industrial.
Yeah,
park.
so the cost to bring it from there as opposed to Main Street is around 3.2. So if you were to go up Main
Oh,
Street, I
and then
think,
to bring it
yeah,
down Main Street for them to catch
Yeah.
on, so that they can go further down Main Street for future.
yeah. So it's kind of a toss up there, and it's,
God, I'd be moving back to Walpole before they finish that project, for God's sake.
the Main Street project.
Yeah, another Main Street project, that's all we want.
I think another year.
That's about, yeah, right next to everybody else in the
Paul
family,
Quincy.
But,
on the hill.
what brought our attention to this was just obviously checking out the industrial park, thinking of not just the study that we've started with MAPC, but just where our resources are and how best to kind of increase the interest and value of those. And so 2 programs initially, I was looking at something called the Site Readiness Program, which is the funding cap is a lot smaller than something like MassWorks, which is a MassWorks program would cover infrastructure costs that would be more in the ballpark of what something like this would cost. But the Site Readiness Program was another option, as well as something they could do for like, from a marketing standpoint. This is through an agency called Mass Development, and, things is just as, new signage, interior landscaping, sidewalks, street pavements, and everything like that. But nothing really, everything kind of hinges on that sewer.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to repave and do everything like that if you don't have that sewer in. So,
Oh, that makes
That's
sense.
brought it
I'm just
back,
wondering what
yeah.
the total, like, let's say you do that, what's the upside of that area anyway? Like, let's say you get all the readiness, you get the sewer, you get such a high water table there, half of
Yeah.
it's swamp anyway, I mean, let's say that project gets approved,
yep,
if you view that area as being maximized,
yeah.
what does that even mean,
So, I kind of tie this back to just my experience in Norwood, where the Vanderbilt Industrial Park is off of Route 1.
Yeah,
So that was a site where we did get a site readiness grant, and part of the reason being is, this site has a lot of turnover in terms of uses that aren't historically, what you think of an industrial park in terms of, there's a swim school there, there's a brewery there, there's a lot
Yeah, yeah.
more,
There's a lot going on there.
internal like gyms or
Like gymnastics down
chiropractic.
there, there's all sorts
Yeah.
of things down there, yeah.
And so, thinking that in the same line of Walpole and the amount of space we have, is that site the same type of turnover? Would that be much more where something like this is going, where you may not have the same type of manufacturing work that you would typically have in the past, or the storage need, but you may have a need for something that is a lot more public facing, I guess I would call it. And so if you were to kind of improve that location to make it much more appealing for a business like that, maybe you can start to see a little more interest in that area, a little
Yeah.
turnover, and try to get something that's much more,
Are there multiple landlords back there?
There are,
There
yeah.
are.
I know, obviously, I think Mr. DeSangro owns a large portion of it, but on Industrial Road, there's multiple landlords. So,
You know what Norwood used to have on that area,
in that area
in
of,
the Vanderbilt area? Used to be a race car track.
oh, was it?
Yeah, they had NASCAR races there in the 50s. Believe it or not.
Demolition Derby.
Demolition Derby, too.
Wow.
I probably heard that at some point. I've heard about the whole plan of like, weren't they looking to do like a football stadium or whatever, like move the Patriots to like University Ave or something like that?
I don't recall
Just
that.
so weird.
I don't remember that.
All right. Someone gave me a document. I don't know if that was.
No, but they had a
Yeah.
legit racetrack there.
track,
Yeah,
Okay.
like, that's what people did on Friday nights. You went to the races.
Yeah.
Do you know
Bring
when?
that back to Walpole.
Oh, sorry. How long ago those solar panels went in that? How long have they been back there?
So that was done, yeah, over 10 years. I would say 2012 at
Okay.
the earliest.
Is that at the end near the storage facility?
Yeah, yeah. So they did that when they passed, it's called the Solar Voltic Overlay District. So that town had to pass zoning for it first. And I think that came in 2012, so.
Does does Norwood Power and, what is it, Norwood Power and Light or Norwood Light? Do they get all that power, or does it go back to the state?
I would imagine they'd probably feed into the grid somewhere. Yeah.
I love Norwood, their own cable company, their own electric company. They did it right. No Verizon in Norwood, right?
Honestly, I don't remember. Yeah.
I heard no.
So those are a couple of ideas that me and Lauren are kind of floating around talking about for the spring in terms of, trying to utilize that program. And we usually been pretty successful with applications through there. The state's done, it's a pretty well-run system.
I think that'll be a deal breaker, or at least a necessity to bring anything of value to the prison site if they decide to develop it.
So, switching topics kind of, but also kind of, no, because we did have our, the first MCI advisory steering committee a few weeks ago. And so, the foundation of that was really kind of trying to, start the process of getting ahead of whatever could potentially happen. There's a lot of missing information that we don't have, because a lot of permitting that happens there is just chiefly done through the state. So there's not like a site plan on file, or they don't have to apply for any special permits. It's a prison. So And a lot of, you know, your utilities are kind of like maintained on-house. So I guess your question about, you know, the viability of a site like that, I think that's what the intention is, to try to kind of figure out from what we can control at the advisory committee standpoint of how much information can we get and what can we provide to the state in terms of, hey, you know, even though you may control this, this property and you're kind of in the, you know, the driver's seat here, the town's taken an active, look into the site, in order to try to get, hey, this is what we would like to see, this is kind of what our concerns were, this is, how we'd see that general area kind of changing over time. So,
Could the state just up and say, yeah, we're gonna give it back to you? Or is that?
no, yeah, 'cause they would have to go through a process of it's like, I think it's, the entity is called DCAM, it's,
Whatever's
state-
there is gonna be a state thing,
Well, that tends if they tend to sell it.
unless they
Yeah,
sell it and they
unless
can
it's-
sell it to whoever they want.
They gotta go through a process with it,
Sure.
like any public entity, but yeah,
But they have to come to the town first, don't they? That was my understanding.
that was, so they did ask that at the
First right of
meeting.
refusal.
It was not confirmed whether or not that was actually
Let's say
something
they
written in
sell it,
stone.
let's, just for fun, let's say they
Yeah.
sell it to Amazon.
Yeah.
Does Amazon then become a Walpole business?
100%.
Yep.
Yeah,
So they have the right to sell it, but then the property reverts back to the town in terms of tax base and everything else.
yes, yep,
So it might be something that they would want to seriously think about to make the site more viable by running sewer up there.
yeah, that's, I mean, that's
How much of that site is not in Walpole?
half of it. So that's the, it's, so the half is in
That's the
Norfolk.
problem. then.
Yeah.
That's
And-
always been the problem with water and sewer up there.
Yeah. It's an interesting area, because I think of it also with like the Southwood Hospital site. So obviously you have the town's ball, you know, the ball fields over there that are, you know, are well established. The Southwood Hospital site needs a ton of cleanup, and there's a lot of kind of, you know, we've heard some things, like they were looking to do more warehouse, out there and not do residential. But I think the town still has to make zoning changes out there, and there's a whole, obviously, the remediation process of that property, and then,
I
you know,
don't
whatever.
understand that. I mean, Chernobyl was cleaned up faster than the Southwood Hospital, for God's sakes.
No,
Seriously, you know, it's
I know,
been a long time.
it's always it's always the argument we hear, though, is that, you know, it's gonna take time to clean up, and it's gonna take money to clean up, and I'm not sure, you know, the group that bought it, they bought it fairly cheap in comparison to what the size of the land is,
Did
so,
they buy all of it?
Yeah.
Was it 82 acres, something like that?
yeah, over 50.
And they bought the whole thing?
I bought the whole thing.
Okay.
So that project is that, you know, is probably obviously moving forward to some extent a lot faster to whatever happens at the, you know, the prison site. That also can kind of give you an idea of what the zoning may be needed for that location. You know, if that changes to just be warehouse and commercial, why, it could certainly influence the prison site, right? If the prison site eventually sells and,
The
you know,
Southwood is all Plainville, right?
No,
No, Norfolk, rather.
yeah,
All Norfolk.
yeah.
And the prison's half Norfolk, half Walpole. Round numbers.
Round numbers, yeah, I mean, if the building itself, yeah, but I think Norfolk technically has more land, but it's
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
it's not all usable, a lot of it's wet on their
Is
side.
there, do you foresee any kind of an issue where it gets split? Where we have defined boundaries between Norfolk and Walpole on that property? I just don't know what the
Well,
process is.
no, I look at it
you know,
like, so a good comparable right now is planning board, I think they just approved the hotel project off of Route 1 where the Applebee's was.
Yeah,
So that's a site that's half, well, majority of it, I believe, is Walpole, and then there's the back portion that's in
Yeah, yeah.
Sharon. So I think like anything else, you would treat it probably as one property, and then however it goes to the permitting process, the towns have to handle that however their zoning is set up. And usually it depends on where the use is. So if there's, you know, for whatever reason, that location within Norfolk doesn't allow a commercial use, then they're gonna either have to have the whole building on the Walpole side, or they're gonna have to change the zoning.
They'll
on the
figure it
Norfolk
out.
side. They'll have to figure it out, yeah. But, yeah, that project is, As that stands right now, like I said, it was really just a kind of an introductory meeting, kind of information stage, you know, trying to gather as much data as we can. I believe we want to do just a site visit at some point.
Is there history on that with other prison sites that have gone through the same thing and what the resolution was?
So historically, I'm not sure, I'm sure there is, and it's a good information to probably have, but to compare right now is, I guess, MCI Concord, just because they've really been fast-tracked through the system, whereas I believe the governor was the one that even, you know, immediately put that on, you know, on the state's decommissioning.
But that's a
Authority.
better site than the Walpole
Yes,
site.
yeah,
A
that-
much more viable site.
That's partly, I think, some of the, at least just from the outside, what would be a deterrent in that location, and kind of similar to the industrial park, right? You are on 1A, but your access to the highway is much more of an interest for.
And I
for
think
something
your
like that.
cleanup at Walpole is gonna be significantly more than what Concord had. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think Concord was running any, sounds bad, but like literal old school prison manufacturing like Walpole was back in
License
the
plates.
day. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. I don't think they ever did that I could be wrong, but I don't believe they did that at Concord.
It's an older site too.
Yeah.
I believe Walpole's only 1956. It's a lot younger than I thought it was.
That surprises me.
But
It
it's,
is younger.
But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of kind of unanswered information in terms of, well, what type of contaminants are there?
Right.
You know, and if they're making license plates, is there any sort of contamination remediation that needs to happen?
And to your point, the Concord site is, I mean, it's right there.
It's,
And it's,
yeah,
so developers are gonna be like, yeah, I'd be all over that.
yeah. Other than it being decommissioned around the same time, it's really not a great comparable in terms of location, just because it's a better location, and obviously where the Walpole Prison is, it's hard to get to by highway, but it's also, it's within our aquifer district too, so it limits the growth of, I mean, the potential
With
build
about,
out.
with about an 18-inch water table, so
Yeah.
that helps.
But other than that, really just kind of, you know, getting a few things kind of squared away with the zoning board in terms of the couple 40B projects. Two of them came back for modifications, which is not surprising. Usually it's sometimes after the fact, if a project either gets sold or if, you know, if anything changes in the market or the interest of the developer, then they come back to a modification, so. those
Ones
are
that are already
already approved, yeah, so.
up in South Walpole, some.
South, yeah, so
Summer
they
Street.
did come back for a modification a few years ago, so that's a good example. They got sold to a new group, and part of that new group's philosophy was all rental. So that's why they did the modification to get rid of the ownership side. But we have a smaller 40B that was approved off of Moose Hill Road, 270 Moose Hill Road, so they've been back before the board. A new owner of that project is looking to do a modification. They initially wanted to go from 8 units to 12, but they're looking to just keep it at 8, but just make some slight changes to the location of the building. So that might be something that's more considered minor, but it's still being looked at by the board right now. And then one project that was considered a substantial modification is Doopy Street, which is off of Route 27.
Yeah.
And so that was similar thing. The property owner or the applicant for that project, he purchased an abutting property, and now he's expanding it from 8 units to 12 units. It's gonna have to go through the process again of being reviewed, but it's usually a much more scaled, I wouldn't say scaled down review, but your review is really consistent of what the changes are. You're not taking like hey, let's look at the whole new project all over again.
Right.
You really have to see what the changes are and compare it to how it relates to the project.
Is there anything going on in that property on the corner of Spring and West?
So that was the project that was approved through the planning board for site plan review. It's a 95-unit building,
Yeah.
with mixed-use building.
That's a big building. for
It's a
that.
big building. I have not heard anything directly other than just kind of talking to our building commissioner, and if he talks to the property owner every once in a while, just to see what
So
they're
they're still moving forward, though? as far
They're
as
still
you know.
mooring forward as far as we know. I think, the intention was to probably bring something forward for this spring, but truthfully, I haven't heard it directly, so I couldn't say, but they did get approved, so I would imagine at some point they're gonna want it.
And that's just market rate, right? That's
It's all market rate.
all market rate.
That's, so, That one's kind of unique in the sense of we did have inclusionary zoning that was passed, and they did a process where while that zoning was before that zoning was put on the warrant for last year, they did what's called an approval not required plan, which is in Massachusetts, when a property owner does something like that, it freezes their zoning for a minimum for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a way for a developer.
Basically saying, here's what we're doing, thank you.
Yeah, or basically, you don't have to abide by what the town is trying to change. So if the town is trying to add a requirement for inclusionary zoning, and, which is what they did that process of doing an A and R, they're exempt from the new zoning, they have to
As
basically.
long as they get in before the change was voted on
Advertised.
at,
Yeah.
only advertised?
Only advertised, so it
So it
really,
doesn't have to go through town meeting and get approved?
technically, the way the state, the way the state zoning law acts is within the first advertisement for the public hearing of the zoning change. If their A and R happens before that, then they're exempt from having to abide by what would be that future zoning. So
But they
it's-
could abide by it if they wanted to? Let's say the zoning got more advantageous?
Certainly,
They could,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, they don't have to do an A and R, that's the thing.
Yeah,
The A and R is kind of the catalyst of the zoning freeze there.
Are those rentals?
Yeah.
As far as you know?
As far
All
as I
rentals?
know, yeah, as far as I know.
It's just 90 more rental units downtown. 90 what? 95, 98 more? How many do you have in your building?
Where,
Your new
the
building.
one, just 10?
10? Restaurants are gonna be humming in Walpole Center, man, I'm telling you. They already are. You can't get a table anywhere. That's good.
No, that's the hope, right? The
Yeah,
spin-off
that's
effect,
the
you can
plan.
get a lot more of those, services.
What about down the street from, what's the name of that place?
The old Gilmore's?
Gilmore's. Is that moving forward?
So I have not talked to the developer in probably 8 months or so, and so I expect that to probably, at the earliest, start to move forward maybe in the fall.
And that's all been approved, right?
That's been approved.
I've got commercial, first floor commercial as well?
That one does not have first floor commercial. There is a component of it that's supposed to be publicly accessible, so there's hardscape improvements to try to add seating spaces, but there's also, I guess they want to call it kind of like a shared workspace that's going to be publicly accessible. So not an actual business, but it will try to have some public.
Well, I mean,
Aspects to
we
it.
can't fill the ones we have now, so, you know,
And that's kind of, not that,
not the worst case what they're doing.
yeah, I think that's, we'd rather see something that's being used than something than just more vacant storefronts, so.
Yeah. All right.
But that's currently, that's kind of it,
And Applebee's is staying put, right? They're
Yes.
part of the project?
part of the
Good.
project.
Good.
There, I believe, I don't know if they went over if we know the Home to Suites
Yeah.
off Route 1, so that was,
Another one going in there?
that's
too?
another one going in there, so there's a hotel there currently. They were also approved for a second
I
building,
mean,
so
but that
that's
property could have
two
been
new,
owner?
same owner, it's,
Different branding?
I believe it's just an expansion of the Home to Suites.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, it does.
So-
now that I'm seeing
Are
it.
they connecting to the original building?
Not connecting two separate buildings.
So they'll probably
Yeah.
brand it with some other Hilton,
That's probably it,
Which is
yeah.
another
Yeah,
Hilton
for a
brand, just to
school thing,
give it some
yeah.
distinction.
So that would have bought Spring
But,
Street.
in terms of that type of growth, I
That's
mean,
correct.
2 hotels in less than a year is pretty good in
Yeah, that's awesome.
tax revenue wise.
Get through there.
Um,
Take a dead end.
That's
Wait.
really it, unless anyone has
Oh,
any
no, it goes
questions
through.
on anything in particular.
We'll go Spring and then Allen jets off
I
of
think
that.
that's all
Allen
good,
will
though.
dump you-
It's all positive.
Allen will dump you down in
Sure.
Norfolk Street. Spring will bring you back out to one.
I just wouldn't like to see any of these projects just keep getting dragged out. Like, what's that street where Hassenjäger was doing that project down on, where they're trying to let go of the dam or pond?
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
so I guess they'll also kind of update you, so.
Pinnacle Point?
Pinnacle Point. So Pinnacle Point, at the last zoning board meeting, the board approved a smaller scale project, under our existing zoning for 16 homes. The way that site is, because it's zoned general residential, you're able to apply for a special permit to have more than one principal unit on a parcel. So
Without them connected.
without them connecting, so, 16 individual, single-family homes whereas the 40B project was 28 townhouses with the potential of up to 40. So that
Wow.
40B project, kind of a legal gray area where it's technically still out there. You know, developer's retaining his rights to that project.
Of course he is.
Of course he is. And the town could close and deny it, but then obviously then you just find yourself back in litigation. But
Right.
with the smaller project approved, it's going to hopefully proceed through, go meeting with the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board and go through the
Does he
regulatory
need,
process
does he
there.
need the dam to go away to make it work?
No.
He does not. So he has the setbacks
Yep.
without, if the dam doesn't go away, he has a setback from the water that he needs.
Yeah, no, he can make the project work with the water.
You
where-
wouldn't be able to make it work the other way, though, without the
No,
water
so
line moving.
both projects, both the 40B and the 40A, the 40A, I mean the smaller
Yeah,
project.
yeah,
Both those just involved what's there. The potential property underneath the pond, or that's not
Oh, so
factored
they
in
both
either or.
work with the setbacks if nothing changes there?
Yeah, obviously the
that's good.
40B project would be a lot different, because if it's a 40B project, he doesn't necessarily have to abide by our zoning. So if something to that scale and where those buildings would be located wouldn't be able to happen unless it was a 40B project, but both projects would be just on that parcel.
I think the neighbors would be much happier with the 16 than the,
Yeah, that was a lot of the feedback that, at least that the board got in public comments. But, you know, right now.
I don't think they want anything, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so at least that project, there's gonna be, if clarity can happen one way or the other, it's moving forward to in some direction, but, you know, we'll see, I guess. Right now, the zoning board has approved their special permit for the use, and now it proceeds with, you know, conservation and planning, so.
See how that goes. Those planning board meetings are always fun. Who's the developer? What's his name?
Wall Street Development,
Lou
Petrosi.
Petrosi?
Yeah.
Be a fly on the wall in that planning board meeting. Those were always entertaining. They were 3.5-hour meetings, but they were entertaining. Okay, anything else?
Nothing at this time. You know, once we get, you know, information for the business forum, anything kind of, I know the steering committee is gonna meet next week, not next week, week after, March 3rd, to hopefully kind of, button up any last things, and then we'll make sure to. kind
And
of-
what's the date on that again?
It's April 3rd is the date of the
The event?
event, yeah.
And what's it start at, like 7:30 a.m.? 7?
Yep.
Okay. Good. Is that everything?
That is all.
Tom, you gonna get your paperwork in?
I will.
You'll be good to go? Excited?
Am.
Good. Excited to have you, sure. All right, well, I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? 6-0, good.
Let's do it.
All right.